Hello.
To describe it, I am a husband to a beautiful wife, father of 4 children. I am engineering in the real world, and I stream on Twitch via programmings and sometimes gaming, but rarely.
How do you not pass out from being like extremely tired for all the things that you do? Like 4 children, a wife, a job, Twitch. What the heck?
I do things swiftly. I just program really fast, so my day job,
fair.
I let my back brain solve 80% of the problems, and when I come to work, I know exactly what I want to do, and so I just do it as fast as humanly possible.
Have you ever been diagnosed with ADHD?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's not a problem. It's a superpower. I like it. My general takeaway for ADHD is the following. ADHD plus maturity is a superpower. ADHD plus excuses is a nightmare, right? Like you got one or the other. You have to fight it every single day. And once you learn to control that wild set of energy inside of you, it becomes awesome. But if you don't, it just rules you. Either the dog shakes its tail or the tail shakes the dog. And I choose one side, and sometimes I have to choose it 14,000 times in a single day. Sometimes I don't,
Were you also very high performing back then, or like?
No. I got a 2.16 in high school, which I believe is barely passing. Yeah, I almost doubled my GPA in college.
Did you find like a magic formula?
I guess the best way to describe it is that when I was younger, I started getting into a lot of trouble. So when I was 4 years old, I discovered pornography. So that was really bad. And so that kind of like affected my brain for an extremely long period of time. And so that kind of drove the addiction complex and all sorts of different aspects of life. And by the time I got to college, I was fairly addicted to many things. Pot would be the nicest thing I'd be doing, right? A lot of LSD, mushrooms, methamphetamines. So at that point, I was fairly addicted to everything. Really what it was that you're trying to fill a feeling. You know what I mean? Everyone has some sort of hole in their life in which you try to justify or fill in with something. And so it was very, very, very difficult during those times. And then just one night, I had an extremely real presence feeling with God that I was going to die to continue this. Like very, very terrifying. Felt real, like this is the end if you continue. So after that day, I said, okay, I do not wish to continue down this route. That was enough for me to say that is the end. From that day forward, I stopped doing those things. Obviously, I struggled with porn the longest for about 3 years. I haven't looked at pornography in 15 years. Don't smoke cigarettes. Don't do meth anymore. That's positive. But that was like the beginning of me learning that I have to take control of things because I let my life be like, I just let whatever I feel dictate what I did. And so at some point I had to stop doing that. And so then by stopping doing that, I started realizing I can control much, much more of how I react, not based on how I feel, but what I think is the right thing to do. And so after that, my first semester in college, I didn't do great, but I definitely actually did not like C's and D's. And I was like, wow, I can do this. I took pre-calculus 3 times and failed. And then by that point, I was like, all right, I am going to do this. That's like the moment that it happened. And at that point, I took Calc 1 and I was the first person to finish every test about 45 minutes to an hour earlier than everybody else and had the highest grade every time. They actually threw out my test every single time. I got like 150% every single time because they had to remove my score from the pool. Yeah, I know. I was the guy that set the curve, just ruining it for everybody else. But then they stopped letting me set the curve. And so after that point, just something clicked inside of me. It's like you do something long enough, there just comes a point where the fruit of that trying changes you. At first, it was hard. I was still getting C's, getting degrees, right? And then all of a sudden, a year after trying really hard every day, and then now I'm me.
Are you also religious?
Yeah, that day was the day I became religious. I wasn't religious before that. I'd put myself as functional atheist at that point before then, just because sure, God, whatever. Like that was probably my biggest attitude towards that. I was like, I haven't really think about it, right? There's nothing up here that's even thinking about those kind of things. And so when that happened, that was a rather larger life change because I was not, let's just say I wasn't planning on it. I was really enjoying, or I thought I did, and also really hated my life at the same time. But I was really enjoying the things I was doing, if you will.
Yeah,
but whenever you're doing things in addiction, you always think you enjoy them. I love smoking cigarettes. And then when you're stopped, you're like, wow, did I hate that?
Did you have to train yourself to get back to have like a discipline or something?
I'm not disciplined in all areas. So there's absolutely no, I would not call myself a fully disciplined person, right? I don't make my bed in the morning. I have stopped a lot of like the uncleanliness habits. Still very, very hard for me to do that. I see that you cleaned up your room, right? We were on a call earlier. It looks cleaner. It's one of those things you have to do. That's why I'm paint. That's why I'm paint, okay? You can't be dirty. But no, but real talk, like I still struggle in a lot of areas. And, you know, there definitely comes a point where I realize you can't win every time. There's probably a point where you get decision satiation. I'm not really sure what the right term would be, but where you can't be on always. You have to have something in which you don't. So I've just kind of, I'll never be the most organized person. And I recognize that because at one point I felt like I almost developed actual OCD, like not the, I have OCD, but like I was organizing my shirts by color. And also I was just like, I've hit the peak. Like I either have to stop or I'm developing a problem. And I recognize that time to stop. So I just stopped right there. And then I've never been clean since.
You're doing something that is amazing. The fact that you recognize you had the problem with all the addictions and then change. And then you had the OCD problem, change.
I've had one more of those actually in my life. I got hit by a car when I was biking in Alaska. And the next day I took one step onto the street. To cross the street, broke out in sweat everywhere. Immediate PTSD. I backed up and I was like, whoa, I can't go across the street. And I realized that this is gonna dictate my life. So I walked across, started sweating profusely. Car screeched, almost hit me again. And I was just like, I cannot live like this. I have to be okay. And for like the next 2 days, I would just sweat the whole time. And then it went away. I do think we have more powers over our body than we probably realize. At least for me, it's worked by just saying no, and then just saying it all day, every day. You have to stop now. You can't stop at the end. That's something else I learned. You don't stop in the middle of a pack of cigarettes, or you don't stop at the end of a pack of cigarettes. You stop in the moment. It's always in the moment. It's always a no at that moment. It's never, okay, I'll be done X. I don't think a lot of people are successful if they allow it, because you're not really winning. You're just, you know, natural separation, which can help. It's not you who's winning. It's the separation.
I am not working out. Tomorrow I start. How does that work in your brain?
Yeah, I tend to do that as well. I will turn, I have to do it. I actually recently did just start working out again.
I hope you do realize how much power do you have for being able to do these quick changes and to not stay in like...
Not all of them were quick though. You know, like the porn one took like 3-4 years. Smoking cigarettes took like a year. You know, there's this old phrase that the distance between your head and your heart is the greatest distance in the universe. I am pretty much in full believer of that. It takes a long time to match what's up here in here. It's best if it comes from here. Every time that something has happened that's really changed my life, it's often that it comes from here to my head, not from my head to here. Everyone's only a couple decisions away from being anything, right? A guy once told me that, you know, what's the difference between you and someone you hate, or someone that we think is repugnant, which is just time and circumstances? Or what's the best way? I heard someone say it, you're just a drink and a wink away from ruining your life. It doesn't take a lot to do vast changes through your life. But I try to be very careful and realize like how fragile all these things actually are. It's not just my strength. My strength will only last for so long.
I remember that once I was in your live and you were saying that you use the ball also because of like with your ADHD, or like because it's like another kind of like entertainment for your body.
I want to say that was Dan. I don't know if I said that. I try not to do tics of any kind, right? You know how people will tap their hands, right? And you let yourself, or you do something, right? It's not really like, I wouldn't call it like a Tourette type tic, but you do things, right?
Yeah.
Everyone has something that they do.
I eat the inside of my cheeks.
Everyone has like some little thing that they do, right? It's really weird how that works out, but I try not to do any of those. I only do things when I want to do them. So if I want to bounce on the ball, I'm going to bounce on the ball. I don't just bounce out of the ball out of habit. It's when the moment is right to bounce on the ball.
Do you ever feel like you want to lose entirely the control? Ever have this feeling of like, fuck it, like, and you...
No, because the other side was terrible.
How much can I ask you about Netflix? I know that landing a job at Netflix is extremely difficult.
My general rule of thumb is what actually happened is that I got really lucky. Like most success in life, it involves a great deal of preparation and luck. Or as my mom used to say, the harder I work, the luckier I get. So I went to a conference and I learned about a technology called RxJS. Back then I did that and I actually got kind of good at it, and I put it on my LinkedIn as a skill. And at that time period, Netflix was under this big guise that they need to hire many people that are good at RxJS. So I really do think that that's probably what happened, is so by putting it on LinkedIn, a hiring manager found it and brought me in for an interview. And I am pretty good at the social side of things, and Netflix tends to be a very social heavy interview. Very light on the technical. In fact, I didn't really even have a technical. Someone asked me an RxJS question and they loved talking so much that I just sat there and baited them in, and they literally wrote the entire solution for me, and I never even knew what I did. That was fantastic. And the rest of it was just like talking to people, like, what's your least favorite feature of Netflix? So I would just be like, I hate this, you know, just really forceful and all that, and they loved it, and then I won.
And how long have you been working for Netflix?
I've been there 9 years and a couple months.
You finished your bachelor, then many years passed before like you went to Netflix. Well, can I ask you, what did you do?
Yeah, I worked at a place called Schedulicity. It is the hardest spelled startup business ever. A very manipulative CEO. It was very, very bad.
Really?
But I worked there for 6 months, and by the end of the 6 months, I said to myself in the car that I will figure out how to be happy even in this situation. I arrive to work, I go to grab a coffee, run into somebody, and he's just like, hey, man. I was like, hey. And he's like, you work at Schedulicity, right? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, how much do you make? And I was like, I make this much. And he's like, I will pay you 50% more, come work for us. And I was like, okay. Because I hated my current job, so it was fantastic. And it was a really good job that I went to. By far the hardest, worked like 60, 70 hours every week. It was very, very difficult, but it was a very, very good experience. It definitely shaped a lot of who I am.
How do you keep yourself organized? Do you prefer agendas? Do you prefer like everything in your brain? How does your brain in organization works?
I don't have any form of tracking.
No way.
I
No
don't
way.
use Jira. I don't write things down. I have come to the conclusion that the things that are important you will remember, and the things that are less important you will forget.
How does doing teamwork with you works?
I just do what is most important that I can possibly do and stay very focused one thing at a time.
What do you think that is potentially most rewarding language or knowledge to have in computer science right now? Like, I'm starting now to study something. What should I start to study right now?
I'd have to ask
English.
English is obviously really important in programming, right? If you didn't know English, I actually do think it'd be really hard. Communication and all that there'd definitely be a barrier there. Doing business in America would be very difficult if you didn't know English, right? So I mean, I don't know if that's a computer science specific problem as much as a business world problem, potentially. So I would follow it up with something a little bit different, which is, what is your goal? To get hired or to understand programming?
The one that will
get
get me a better job with a better salary.
Then to me, the easiest and most straightforward path of all time is JavaScript UI. That is the huge area, very, very easy to, or when I say easy to get hired in, because I know there's a lot of people that have spent a year, they're still not hired, they're very disheartened by it. Easy being easy for the fact that you can't just get hired writing a compiler, right? There's like 1,000 people, 500 people maybe total working on a compiler. So that's much, much different. Whereas there's a large audience and an ever-growing audience working on UI or middleware, JavaScript area. So it's just the easiest of all the places. So that's kind of where I would go, is that, or Java. Java has right now the biggest industry standard. There's a lot of companies that are definitely hiring for Java. So it's kind of like you pick those two languages, you'll probably be successful. Now, will you like Java? That's a completely different question, you know?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you for this call. Bye.
All right, bye-bye.